So today, Michelle's topic is called Transition from School When the Bus Stops Coming. She's a parent, and so she's going to talk about her transition for her daughter in 2020. So Michelle is a parent of a 24-year-old on the spectrum who transitioned from school during the 2020 pandemic shutdown. Michelle will discuss lessons learned, options after high school, and what she wished she knew before and during this transition. Michelle is also contracted through the ARC of Indiana Advocacy Network and a longtime advocate for health insurance coverage for autism treatment. Michelle, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, everybody who took some time out of your day to talk about transition and to join us today. Really appreciate that. Like Melissa said, I have a 24-year-old on the spectrum, moderately affected, verbal, but not conversational, does also have an intellectual disability. So she's, I do want to recognize from the get-go that, all of our loved ones who are on the spectrum are so different. We always say you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So my perspective is from that part of the spectrum, but I will address transition issues that, really do affect everyone. But just to note and to understand that everyone's transition is going to look different because everyone is so different and has different dreams and has different ideas of what a good life is for them. So just want to put that out there from the beginning. And did transition from school in the middle of the pandemic, which was obviously not ideal, but it's the way it happened. So went into lockdown in March of 2020, and then she was done and aged out of school at the end of that school year. So it wasn't quite the transition we were hoping for or planned for. And so that was the first big lesson, was transitions are going to happen, maybe not the way we do plan, and unexpected things are going to happen. And we are all going to be dealing with this pandemic situation, for the foreseeable future. So it's something that we have to build into our plans, and also something that we have to recognize we're going to have some flexibility in our plans, because life happens, and that's just the way it goes. So just a couple background basics to get started. Article 7 and IDEA do require that students who have IEPs and 504 plans have transition planning as part of that process beginning at age 14. It was recognized that transition is complicated and takes time. And so it became recognized that this needed to start happening at an early age, that we couldn't wait until 18 or we couldn't wait until 22. So that is a requirement and should be part of the IEP process. A lot of every school district does things a little bit differently, but every school district has some personnel that are dedicated to working on transitions. And so you'll want to know who that person is and have a relationship with that person so that you can get the information that you need to have a successful transition. It is noted in Disability Scoop, which is a disability newsletter, that most IEPs and 504s don't really have adequate transition planning. So it is something that we have to get better at in our education system. So, don't feel badly about asking questions about this, asking this to be a focus for an IEP meeting, or even having an extra IEP meeting just to talk about transition if you feel like you need that. Because right now we're just really not seeing that there's an adequate level of planning going on for our students, and their transition can be complicated. Another thing to keep in mind that I did not know in the transition process is that the whole concept of least restrictive environment also applies to any work placements that are part of IEPs or 504 plans. So it's not necessarily correct to say to a student, well, if you want to explore jobs, you can only do jobs in the school, or you can only do errands in the school. whatever is the least restrictive environment for that individual student. We have to keep remembering there's that I in IEP, individualized. So kind of blanket rules like we never do this or we never allow students to go there. That's something to ask for more information about and to question, because that least restrictive environment also applies to this transition process and any work placements that may go along with it. And then another really important thing is that guidance from the federal government has told schools that it's really important for special education departments and the state's vocational rehab departments to collaborate and to work with school-aged children and young adults to make their transitions more successful and to explore what the possibilities are for after high school. And so it's really important that all parents know about what's called pre-ETs. And it's something I didn't find out about until I think my daughter's second to last year in high school. And I wish I had known about it sooner. The pre-ETs program is pre-employment transition services. And so part of what the pre-ETs program is all about is to allow students to do job exploration and to try different jobs. A lot of our loved ones, learn by doing. And so this program can help set up different job exploration trials in the community and to look at the students' skills and look at what they're good at and try to match that with their interests and to have them try different jobs. So my daughter was able to, unfortunately, only participate in this her very last year of high school, which was cut short because of the pandemic. But even with the short amount of time that she was able to be in this program, she tried 4 or 5 different jobs and found a few things that she really enjoyed and was really good at. And it was so gratifying to see her do that and to see her feel successful and to be working with people out in the community. She worked at a nursing home. She worked at a Goodwill store. She tried all kinds of different jobs within the school as well. And she really found some things that she really liked. And so that was really wonderful to see her be so successful and to be able to do that. And I wish I'd known about it sooner so that she could have done that for multiple years instead of just the last year of school. And the other thing that was important to know about the pre-ETs program, it is not just for diploma track students. It's for any student that has an IEP. So I was told that non-diploma students were not allowed to do the pre-ETs program. And I came to find that that's not the case. And so made sure that I worked with her school district collaboratively to get her set up in that for her last year of school. So it's not just for diploma track students, it's for all of our loved ones. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about so just to go back a little bit with our story, my daughter was on track for a certificate of completion. And, we did go to a high performing, well-funded school district. It's just the reality of the world is that budgets are budgets and there are not unlimited funds for all of our children, but we were lucky to be in a school district that is considered to be high performing and well funded. So, and even with that, there were challenges in terms of getting the type of transition that I think would have been a little bit more successful, even, pandemic aside and having things cut short, pandemic aside. My daughter did a braided medical ABA and education program and had ABA trained aides and ABA consultation in the school during her time there. Mostly due to behavioral issues and making sure that those were consistently addressed across all environments and across all settings with her. We did that via a due process with our school district and but was able to maintain a good, healthy relationship with her teachers and with the school district through that process. But one thing I will say is there was a constant battle against low expectations. And I think that can sometimes be common. But that's just something to keep in mind, especially the parents online who have younger children who have not yet started this transition process. Our loved ones can amaze us with some of the stuff that they can do if we let them, and if we get other people to allow them to do their best and to do what they can do. And so don't be afraid to fight against that low expectations, because everyone has capabilities. And as parents of kids with disabilities, a lot of times we hear a lot about what they can't do and what they won't do or what they'll never do. And, we don't know that. We'll let our kids teach us what they can do and show us what they can do by giving them opportunity. And as I said before too, but the whole pre-ets and doing the job searching, that is also for non-diploma students. So definitely make sure that if your loved one is not on a diploma track, that you still explore to see if that is going to be a good program for them, because you just never know. It's by doing and by being able to participate in that. I really found that my daughter surprised all of us in what she could do and what she enjoyed doing as well. I think the other important thing I would share as kind of an older mom who's been through this process is my husband and I both had to really shift our mindset about our daughter and shift some of our expectations. We had to recognize that, when she was a younger child, as parents, you're more of an authority figure and you're more of a teacher. And we really had to recognize that, just like with neurotypical kids, that those teenage years and getting into young adulthood, there's a transition. There's a natural transition where they want more self-direction. They want more choices. But choices you can live with. And so creatively setting up those scenarios where you're switching your mindset and being more of a mentor and a guide and doing more negotiation with your loved one. And like I said, my daughter is not extremely verbal. So there are ways to work that into, even with children who are becoming teenagers and adults who are not that verbal, to give them more self-direction, more choices, and to teach some negotiation skills at the level that they're able to do it. And so that when they get to their adulthood situation, that, kind of like all of us, we all go and get coaches and mentors and friends and family to help us make decisions when we're getting ready to make decisions. And so we can do that for our loved ones and teach our loved ones through the teenage years how to do that for themselves as well. It's just going to look a little bit different because of their autism or because of their disability. But it was something that we really had to consciously do. Is, she's not a child anymore. She's going to be an adult. We're not going to be around forever, although we would love to be. We've got to prepare her to do more in terms of being independent to the extent that she can be. And another thing that I will say about independence is, I know when we were going through our transition process, I was frequently given a sheet of paper of attorneys who could help us get full guardianship of our daughter. But one thing we didn't talk about in this entire transition planning process was that there are so many options besides full guardianship that are available for families and for people with disabilities. And so I would strongly, strongly encourage you to explore all of the options. You can get power of attorney for healthcare or for financial decision-making if your loved one, if it your loved one develops and evolves so that they can direct a lot of things in their life, but they need help in certain situations, just like we all need help in certain situations. There are some limited legal steps that can be taken so that you can guide your loved one and you can make sure that they're not taken advantage of, but they're still given the opportunity to have the independence that they can handle and that they can benefit from. There's certainly something that we talk about at the ARC is the dignity of risk and the dignity of making choices. And while that is scary for a parent, that's also how we all learned to manage our own lives, is by making mistakes and by making our own decisions. And so definitely look into all of the options besides full guardianship, because we do need to give our loved ones the opportunity to live the kind of life that they want to have, but to have the support and the safety net when they need it and not overreach that support or safety net when they really don't need it. Because full guardianship really does take away a lot of rights, and it may not be the best option for every individual. So wanted to definitely throw that out there. And we have on the ARC of Indiana's website a lot of information about all of the options in terms of assisting people with disabilities, from supported decision-making all the way up to, kind of the most intrusive, which would be full guardianship. So and our website's at the end of this presentation. So I encourage you to investigate that.
So we do have a question from Marissa as how did you approach the power of attorney of guardianship? So Marissa, I'm gonna open your mic and you can elaborate if you want to.
Hi, yeah, so I'm actually not a parent, I'm a transition coordinator. And so I kind of wanted to see what your meeting was all about. And I just wanted like a parent's perspective, how you've approached that. I've been in meetings and some of them have no idea of these options. So, as a parent perspective, how did you approach that?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. I approached it by really getting connected with the advocacy organizations, the family advocacy organizations. So the ARC, Autism Society of Indiana, Autism Society of America, Autism Speaks, and get information from various sources about various good sources about the different options. And then looking at my daughter and her needs and what she's capable of, and then going from there. We do see at the ARC, we do have families and even people with disabilities contact us who are under full guardianship, and they really can manage a lot of their own affairs. They just, a lot of their own decision making. They just need some help every once in a while, just like we do. And so we encourage families to look at supported decision making for those types of situations. But it's really looking at the going to the advocacy organizations and getting connected with them and getting all of the up-to-date information and accurate information on what the options are. There's various levels of durable power of attorney and limited guardianship, full guardianship. And so it's being really realistic about what your loved one can do, and also letting go a little bit too, and allowing them to do as much as they can. And it's scary, for sure. It's scary for sure. And so that's why I have here in one of my lessons learned is that there's a reason why this transition planning takes years, is that we have to start thinking about the end game, or how independent our loved one can be, so that we can really consciously prepare them for that during this whole process, during those teen years. A lot like you would with a neurotypical child, but with our loved ones with disabilities, we have to be extra intentional, extra concerned about the planning and really getting to know what our loved one can do. So it's really taking that time to plan that. And the planning, I feel, for me as a parent, really helped reduce my anxiety about my daughter's future. As hard as it is to do during the day-to-day of just trying to get through the day sometimes, having the opportunity to do that planning did really help reduce some of the anxiety of parenting a young adult.
Marissa, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So lessons learned, for me, one of the big things was, and I was in a meeting with someone the other day, and I wish I could remember who said this because I'd love to give them credit for it. But they said something about, we have to think about output versus outcome. And output is just, the things we did to check the boxes and we can say we ticked it off. But the outcome is about that meaningful progress and really making change in the person's life or in the family's life. And so I would suggest challenging the entire team that works with your loved one, whether it's their waiver people or whether it's their school folks or whether it's any medical intervention that they're doing. They're all on one team, which is your loved one's team. And so really challenging them to think about the outcome and to all recognize that they're all in adult services, whether your child is 4 or they're 11 or they're 16. Everyone who works with your child is really in adult services because they're trying to help you on your child's team get them to be as successful an adult as they can possibly be and to get them to live the kind of life that they want to live. So really focusing on those outcomes versus, did we check all the boxes in our compliance list or something like that. And then the other thing that I was really reflecting on after my daughter went through kind of an accelerated transition is that a lot of parents of loved ones with disabilities, we want a lot of the same things that every parent wants. We want our kids to be happy. We want them to be healthy. We want them to have successful lives where they're doing things every day that they enjoy, that are productive, and that are contributing somehow to the world. And our kids can do that too. It just looks different. And so we really all want a lot of similar things. And so that led me to really try to let go a little bit and let my daughter show me what she could do and to let her try things and to let her fail safely, fail with someone on the side ready to, kind of help if need be, because that's how she was going to learn. And so, and sometimes that was hard, you had to kind of not lower your standards, but kind of change your mindset a little bit and change your standards a little bit. And, if things didn't go perfectly, that's okay. If things didn't go well, at the end of the day, that was okay because we all learned something and she learned something. She got some independence out of that. Like I said, this planning, it takes years because it should take years. It really should be planning every year, not just checking the boxes that we talked about transition during this IEP, but what plans did we make? What outcome are we trying to get from the transition plan for this particular IEP season and make sure that they're outcomes focused. Again, flexibility, because life is going to happen, things are going to happen. And, no one could have predicted what 2020 was going to look like in 2018 or 2019. So try to build some flexibility into your planning and have some, backup plans if something doesn't quite work out the way that you hoped it did. And one thing that, I'll never forget as a child, my family loved to watch PBS. And I remember watching a movie about a family who adopted multiple children with disabilities. And they had multiple different types of disabilities. One of the children had autism. One of the children was quadriplegic, but they all had chores that they had to do. And no one helped them with their chores. They had to figure out how to get the chores that they were assigned done. And I just remembered that because I just thought that's so cool that everybody contributes in that house. And so I wanted to make sure that I had my daughter contributing at whatever level she could all the time in our house, so that she knew that she was important, capable, and that she also had a responsibility to contribute in our house. And that's going to look different for everybody. And there were certainly days where that was a fight. And sometimes it was just, if you put one spoon away from the dishwasher into the drawer, you know, you get your reinforcer, but you have to do something, even if you're having a bad day. And so I think that was helpful for her to understand that as a part of a family, as a part of a group, you are important and you are capable and you have to contribute. That's part of your responsibility. And that's, you know, what a lot of us as adults have to do as well. And so, so kind of looking at things in that way. And then also, I think one lesson I learned was to be creative, because it's really interesting when you start really thinking about jobs that your loved one would be good at. It's amazing what you read about and research about and find out that people get paid to do. So my daughter used to be obsessed with spoons, and I read a story about a gentleman who's paid to design spoons. So, you know, you just never know when one of your loved ones' obsessions or quirks or what have you might become the job that they do and enjoy for the rest of their lives. So be creative, and also really encourage the folks that you're working with in school to think, you know, kind of outside the typical jobs that, you know, people with disabilities do. I have the privilege of working with a lot of self-advocates at the ARC. And they all say, you know, I really wish that when I was in school, they didn't try to push me to work at a fast food restaurant, or they didn't try to push me to work, you know, at McDonald's or at a movie theater. I don't like movie theaters. And so just really taking to heart, talking to and learning through the person's behavior, if they're not verbal, what they like, what they enjoy, what they're good at, and trying to find out what's a job that fits that versus, oh, these are the jobs that people with disabilities do, so we're going to go make them do that. And so that's what the self-advocates really taught me as a lesson in that as well. And so that gets a little bit better to this slide. I did have the privilege of being on a committee, a statewide committee, to talk about employment for people with disabilities. And so wanted to share some of the lessons learned from that. The employers said, you know, that for our loved ones with autism, and this probably will not come as a surprise, is a lot of times the breaks, lunchtime, unstructured time, those were challenges. But they found that when the managers were educated and when they really did what they should be doing for all of their employees, is putting the right person in the right kind of job, something that they're going to be good at and enjoy, then they were really successful. And so that's kind of a key in this transition planning, is finding out what they're good at, what they enjoy, and then finding a job that matches that versus trying to put a square peg in a round hole, so to speak. And then what we also heard from self-advocates and employers is just the benefits. I was talking to a neighbor who employs some folks with disabilities at a Target, and he loves it because they're always on time. They follow the rules. They don't waste a lot of time. They have great safety. They follow all the safety rules, so they're not having accidents or hurting themselves because they weren't following the protocols, fewer sick days. And we had a gentleman from Walgreens speak at the ARC once, and he talked about how he had a plant that their goal was to employ at least 30% people with disabilities. And the manager said, you know, oh, how can we do that? It's not going to work out. Well, they did it, and it actually turned out to be their most productive most productive distribution center in their network. So our loved ones can do a lot if we just get them in the right jobs and get them following a path that plays to their strengths and also plays to what they enjoy. And so I think that's a big lesson learned there. I put Beyonce in here because my daughter loves Beyonce. And she also says that my daughter says that she's a fierce and independent woman. And I think of Beyonce when I think of fierce and independent women. So, you know, bottom line was just that the whole thing about future adulthood and whatever your loved one chooses to do, live an independent life, if they're able to go to college, they're able to, you know, do post-secondary education, that's fantastic. Or if they're more challenged on the spectrum and they're going to do something more in lines with like what my daughter would do, which would be working at a job that she enjoys, that's repetitive because she loves that repetitive stuff. Whatever it is, that work ethic, that responsibility, that transition to adulthood really does start at home, and starting early to, just like we do with our neurotypical kids, to when they're ready, teach them those responsibilities and that accountability, and to negotiate at the level that they can. And then, you know, find what they like and what they're good at, and they can study it, they can work doing it, they can really integrate that as part of their life so that they're living their best life like we would hope for any of our children. So, so that's what my daughter really especially taught me throughout this entire process. And then just wanted to put up here some different resources. You know, do try and do those transition fairs that schools put on, or that communities and advocacy groups put on. You can see what choices are out there and see what kind of programs are out there. You know, I think we always wish there were more opportunities, and I hope that we'll start seeing more and more opportunities as time goes on and we get better at disability services, but do definitely look into that. There are several universities that have programs specifically targeted for people with autism, specifically targeted for people with disabilities. And every university has to have a disability office that assists people with disabilities who are enrolled and are taking classes. So definitely look into that. And not every university program is solely for super high functioning people either. There are limited, but there are some university programs that work with folks who do have intellectual disability to get some college experience and some experience of being on a college campus and taking some classes that they're able to take. So those are starting to emerge out there in the world as well, which is great to see. Also here in Indiana, we have, through the ARC of Indiana, the Erskine Green Training Institute. It is a training institute up in Muncie that works with people with autism, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they live on site in the training hotel, and they learn independence skills, they learn work skills at the hospital, at the restaurant, at the hotel, and then they leave with a certificate that shows, after their weeks-long training, shows prospective employers what they can do. So that they can go out into the community and look for a job that they would enjoy and that they would be good at. After school, a lot of adults do day programs. That's one thing that my daughter is doing. And a lot of the day programs will also work with vocational rehabilitation to teach job skills and to do some job exploration as well. So those programs can partner. We talked about pre-ETs and just also too, vocational rehabilitation through the waiver. That's something to definitely explore. And hopefully as the pandemic winds down, we'll be able to do more of that with our loved ones and get back into more community-based services as more and more people are opening up. So that's something that we have not yet been able to explore because of the pandemic, but looking forward to getting my daughter back into some vocational rehabilitation services. The Autism Society of Indiana has their Launch into Life program and also career services. So I'd encourage you to look at that. And then also throughout the state, the ARC of Indiana has various service chapters and advocacy chapters. So you can look on our central website for the chapter locations throughout the state and find whether or not they're advocacy or service. And they can also be a resource as well.
Michelle, we have a question from
Yeah.
Angela Smith, and she says, what if you didn't get any transition help because of the pandemic? So I was wondering, Angela, if your child is still in school or if one of these resources is something you could use now. So I'm going to open your mic and you can go ahead and ask your question if you want.
Hi, yes, thank you for taking my my question.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this. My son received a certification of completion, certificate of completion, and it was during the pandemic, so in 2020. And when school got back into session in 2020, like for the next season, I contacted them and they were like, there's really nothing that we can do now that he's out of school.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, once he crossed that stage, sorry, we're like, we can't help you anymore. We did have the opportunity where he was trying out jobs like you had mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and at different locations, and that was extremely cool.
Yeah.
And, he enjoyed those, and he tried a couple of different ones, and then when the pandemic, of course, they couldn't go.
Right.
But I just kind of felt like we were just kind of nicely like let go because of the situation with the pandemic, and just trying to see like, how do I get back into some of those things now?
Yeah. Is your son on a waiver by any
Yes.
chance?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Contact your case manager and let your case manager know that you want to get him back into some vocational rehabilitation.
Okay.
And job exploration, and then your case manager will work with you to get that process done and get him signed up for that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and there's a labor shortage right now, and I think we're seeing some employers being more open to employing people with disabilities because of all the benefits that I listed before. And so, yeah, and just, doing that safely, obviously, but vocational rehabilitation is going to be the avenue you want to explore to get him back into doing some job exploration and trying some different things.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think Debbie Peterson has said, could she seek compensatory services? But I'm not sure she can because he's graduated.
Yeah. I think that, unfortunately, those of us who have aged out during the pandemic, our loved ones have aged out. I don't think that compensatory services would be possible. I don't think so. But I do, the vocational rehabilitation is going to be a good service to get tapped into for sure.
Angela, thanks for your question.
Yes, thank you. And then I just have a few other resources that I've listed here. There are several organizations that have kind of toolkits around transition, and can be really good, reliable resources for that. I always like to say to parents, Facebook is a great thing to connect with people, but it's not the best place for reliable information, just because there really isn't any. When one of the advocacy organizations puts information on the web, we're ethically obligated to vet it and to, update it and to, we don't always get it 100% right, but we're obligated to make sure that we give the most up-to-date information we know of and to update it. And so I really encourage parents to go to the advocacy organizations and to like the Indiana Resource Center for Autism and other university-based organizations, because they do have to vet their information and they do have to update their information. And so you want to make sure you're getting reliable information. So these are some of the websites that I recommend for that. And some of those toolkits are really nice, kind of step-by-step, can really kind of help guide you through the process so that you don't feel like you're reinventing the wheel. And the InSource website has a really nice transition portfolio that you can kind of set up for your individual. I wish I'd known about it during the transition process. So I really encourage you to look at that, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and to just get the good resources that are out there. So, so those are some good resources there. And, thank you so much for spending some time with me today to talk about transition.